These 5 men have vanished after boarding a submersible to visit the Titanic. Last Sunday, 5 people boarded a submersible, which is kind of like a submarine in Newfoundland, Canada, but has lost contact with the operator only 1 hour and 45 minutes into the trip. The Titan was built for tourists to visit the wreck of the Titanic, which is located 12,400 feet underwater. It has 96 hours of oxygen available, which means that the people inside will run out of oxygen by Thursday. The Titan can reach 13,123 feet underwater, and it's operated using what looks like a modified game controller. The 5 people who boarded the Titan are known to be wealthy businessmen as well as a 19-year-old boy. But what's interesting to me is that everyone had to sign a waiver accepting that this submersible can potentially cause their death. The Titan only started taking people down in 2021, and it's been reported that there's been so many issues with this process. And keep in mind that it's not cheap to do this excursion. Everyone paid $250,000. Nevertheless, I hope the Titan is found and everyone is brought back home safe.
The woman who survived Ted Bundy.
Carol Darren was nearly one of Ted Bundy's victims, as he pretended he was a police officer, telling her that she needed to file a police report for a break-in on her car. She fought for her life and managed to flee the car and get help from somebody driving the other way.
6 teenage boys played a harmless ding-dong ditch prank on this man's home, and just minutes later, 3 of them were dead. On the evening of January 19th, 2020, 6 teenage boys and best friends were having a sleepover and celebrating Jacob Avosku's 16th birthday. Later that night, one of the boys was dared to either jump into a pool or ding-dong ditch somebody's house, and after choosing the latter, they all got into a Prius driven by their 18-year-old friend and picked a random house. The house they chose belonged to 45-year-old Anurag Chandra in Corona, California. Once there, one of the teens hopped out, rang the doorbell, mooned the camera, and then got back into the Prius, where they quickly drove off. But this harmless prank angered Anurag so much that he got into his car and started chasing the teens. He was going 99 miles per hour in a 40-mile-per-hour zone, and when he caught up to the Prius, he intentionally rammed into the back and side of it. This caused it to go off the road, quickly slamming into a tree and utility pole. The crash immediately killed Drake Ruiz, Daniel Hawkins, and Jacob Avosku, all 16 years old. According to Anurag, he didn't stop after the crash and proceeded to go home after hitting the kids because he didn't think anyone was hurt. He was arrested at his home later that same night. The driver and 2 other 13-year-olds who were also in the car were injured but survived the crash. During the investigation, Anurag said that the prank angered him so much, but also said that he decided to chase after the teens because he was worried for his family's safety after being mooned. It was also revealed that in the 3 hours before the prank, Anurag consumed 12 beers and was highly intoxicated. Anurag has just been charged with 3 counts of murder and 3 counts of attempted murder and has since pleaded not guilty. He's due back in court on July 14th and faces life in prison without parole. It's also worth noting that at the time of the killings, Anurag was already facing domestic violence and battery charges in an unrelated incident.
On May 20th, 2022, Orono police in Minnesota pulled over Julissa Thaler for driving with a shattered windshield and on one rim. During the traffic stop, the police noticed blood on Thaler's hand, as well as a shotgun shell, a spent shell casing, and a bullet hole in the back seat of the car. Upon further investigation, the police discovered a child's body in the trunk.
There, alright. There's what?
Blood all over the car.
I have a broken windshield and I'm missing a tire because some kids were shooting at my car. I had some...
What looks like blood in there?
It's not blood, it's deer meat. I had a big bag of, there's a farm around here that does deer meat and hamburgers.
Shotgun shells all over the side.
Yeah. Holy so we got a body. Yeah. Alright, let's cover it.
Yep.
The child was later identified as Eli Hart, a kindergarten student who aspired to become a firefighter. Additionally, a shotgun was found in the trunk. Just 10 days prior to this incident, Thaler had been granted full custody of Eli after a lengthy custody battle. Unfortunately, the 6-year-old boy had been shot 9 times with a shotgun, and part of his remains had been disposed of in a gas station dumpster. The state of Minnesota offered Thaler a second-degree murder charge, which carries a 40-year sentence instead of first-degree murder, which mandates a life sentence upon conviction. However, Thaler refused the deal, asserting, "I would never do that to my son. I want to go to trial." On February 2023, Hennepin County District Court Judge Jay Quam sentenced Thaler to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I'm innocent. Fuck you all. You're garbage.
Do these images make you uncomfortable? If they do, this is a concept called uncanny valley, where people have a strange, uneasy feeling when they look at robots that are too lifelike, or anything that looks or acts human, but there's something off about them. This concept was introduced in the 70s by a professor at the Tokyo Institute of Technology named Masahiro Mori. He coined the term uncanny valley to describe his observation that as robots appear more human-like, they become more appealing, but only to a certain point. Let me know in the comments if you experience this.
The indescribable pain of two families brought together in circumstances no parent would wish for. Their grief still so very raw as they came together to remember Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar. On this intense summer's day, thousands of students and staff gathered at a vigil on their university campus to pause and reflect and listen as their fathers spoke of their loss.
I've lost my baby boy, and I can't even comprehend how I'm going to deal with it. Myself and Emma and Charlie and all his family and friends. Well, I know Barney will be super touched by everyone that's here, and he loved it. He loved it here. His heart will be with you guys forever.
All of you guys, everywhere that I see of people. Such a lovely sign of the university and the bond you have. Grace was also like Barney. She loved coming up to Nottingham. Look after each other. It's the big thing. Is that look after your friends and look after people around you. This is so important.
Grace had dreamt of becoming a doctor. Barnaby was a talented young cricketer studying history. And today the third victim was named as Ian Coates, a school caretaker just months away from retirement. His family described his death as having rocked their world.
When he said, "You're never getting out of here," I knew that was my life flashing in front of me. It sure has changed a lot, all the new buildings.
But the memories of a snowy Seattle day in 1972 are clear and haunting.
He was dressed real nice, handsome looking.
It was in this area. This has all been changed.
Car pulled up to the curb, rolled down the window and said, "Hello, young lady, are you waiting for the bus?" And he goes, "Well, you know, I've come down Rainer Avenue and that's a long ways and there's not a bus in sight. Would you like a ride?"
So you hopped in his car not thinking it was going to be a problem at all?
No, I thought how happy I am now. I'm in a warm car and I get to where I'm going.
He started, reaching under the seat, started yelling at me, "Why did you take this ride? Why did you even think about taking this ride?
You're never going to make it to the school." And I thought,
wow. I was sobbing and praying and, pleading for my life practically. Don't do anything, don't harm me. You should have never taken this ride, and shut the up.
She says Bundy's beratement led to a bizarre demand.
He goes, take your hat off.
And I said, what do you mean take my hat off, my stocking cap off? What for? And he goes, why did you cut your hair? Why did I cut my hair? I keep thinking, did he stalk me? Did he see me somewhere? Was he waiting for me, or was he watching me? He says, well, put that hat back on.
So Tria speculates the hair that she had cut a week earlier may have saved her life.
He could have killed me. It was just thank God I had gotten my hair cut.
This is what happened to sisters Sarah and Amina Saeed and how they identified their killer in a 911 call. Amina was born on March 3rd, 1989 in Dallas, Texas, and her younger sister Sarah was born on March 16th, 1990, also in Dallas, Texas. They had an older brother named Islam, and their parents were Patricia Owens and Yasser Saeed. There's a very big age gap between Patricia and Yasser. When they started dating, Patricia was only 14 years old and Yasser was 29. Within 3 weeks of dating, Yasser and Patricia decided to get married. Now, the only way that Patricia was allowed to get married is by her parents' permission. The way they got this is that Yasser told her family that he was wealthy and that he would provide for Patricia. Now, Patricia's family didn't come from a lot of money, so when they heard this, they agreed and they allowed Patricia to marry Yasser at 15 years old. However, what Yasser said wasn't technically true. He didn't come from a lot of money. In fact, he actually worked as a taxi driver, which there's nothing wrong with, but he lied to Patricia. They got married and she actually had to work multiple jobs to help provide for the family. About 6 months into their marriage, things started to go downhill. Patricia claims that Yasser became physically and mentally abusive. When Amina and Sarah were 8 and 9 years old, they told their maternal grandmother that their father, Yasser, had been essaying them for about 2 to 3 years. Of course, the grandmother told Patricia about what the girls had said, so Patricia packed up their things and moved out. Officers went to go speak to Amina and Sarah, and they told the police that their father had put his front part into their front part. However, before Yasser could get arrested, the girls recanted their statement. Now, Patricia's side of the family believes that Yasser somehow convinced Patricia to convince the girls to recant everything and to admit that they made everything up. And for some reason, police just believed them and they never followed through with the investigation. After they recanted their statement, they packed everything back up and they moved back in with Yasser. Even though they recanted their statement, a lot of people feel like the girls were telling the truth. There are these home videos made by Yasser and they just make you feel so uncomfortable. In this video here, Amina and Sarah were in their bed trying to hide from their father. He kept filming them and the girls kept telling him to go away, to erase the footage, and to leave them alone. At one point, Yasser tells her brother Islam to remove the girls' blanket, and Islam does. After the blankets get removed, Yasser starts to tell the girls that they have very nice legs, and he also zooms in on Sarah's butt. Yes, he's zooming in on his own daughter's body. It's just very creepy, and you can clearly see that both girls are uncomfortable with their father. By the time the girls were teenagers, Yasser was already trying to set them up with an arranged marriage back in Egypt. Obviously, the girls did not want this. They wanted to date and, find their own person, but Yasser wanted to set them up. On December 24th, 2007, Amina refused another one of her dad's proposals for an arranged marriage. And this made him angry, so Patricia and the girls packed up their things and left. Everyone kept telling Patricia to not go back to Yasser, but unfortunately, she did. Amina actually had a secret boyfriend at the time, and when she found out that her mom was going back to Yasser, she texted him this. January 1st, 2008, 911 received a phone call from 17-year-old Sarah Saeed. He told the operator, "Help me, my dad shot me, I'm dying." Okay, more in part 2. This is what happened to 14-year-old Norma Lisbeth and how she was killed after getting into a fight with her school bully. Norma Lisbeth Ramos was a 14-year-old girl that lived in Teotihuacan, Mexico. She was the youngest of 3. She had an older sister named Alma and an older brother named Omar. Now, we don't really know much about Norma, but her friends and family say that she used to be filled with so much happiness and life. She wanted to grow up, she wanted to become a nurse and help others. However, as Norma started to grow up, that light and happiness once inside of her started to quickly fade. This is because Norma was being bullied at school. Some of her friends have come forward and said that the bullying started all the way in elementary school. People would make fun of her skin color, they would call her morenita, they would make fun of the fact that she had curly hair. The kids were brutal to her, and most of the aggression came from another student named Asada Eileen. It seemed like Asada was obsessed with bullying and tormenting Norma. She would make fun of Norma's skin color, she would make fun of the fact that Norma's family didn't have a lot of money. She would even tell the other students, if you try to be nice to Norma, if you try to talk to her, if you try to be her friend, we're also going to bully you. Asada would hype up the other students, and the minute that Norma would step foot onto campus, the bullying would immediately begin. She would walk into a classroom and people would actually throw things at her. The few friends that Norma had came forward and told reporters that a couple of the classmates had actually threatened to physically assault Norma. One day, Norma went to the school bathroom and a couple of her classmates walked in and they tried to beat her up. Norma tried to put an end to it and the classmates told her, if you snitch on us, then we will assault you. It seemed like the whole school was against her, so Norma actually did speak up and she told her professors about what was going on. She told them about the taunting, about the bullying, about the threats, but nothing was done about it. In fact, one of her teachers told her, girls will be girls. She basically tried to make it seem that this is what teenage girls do, that they bully each other, that they make fun of each other, and that that's just how things are. However, it wasn't just girls that were bullying Norma, it was the boys in the class as well. Literally everybody would taunt her, and on February 20th, 2023, Norma's main bully, Asada, confronted her and told her that the next day, on February 21st, she wanted to meet her outside of the school to get into a physical fight. And she told Norma that she better show up. Of course, Norma was scared, so she tried to tell the director of the school about the fight, but the director did not listen to her. The director told her, "Can you give me a moment? I'm really busy," and she turned around and ignored Norma. Norma just didn't know what to do. She had already told the professors about the bullying. She had told the director of the school, but no one cared. So she felt like the only option she had was to show up to the fight the next day and defend herself. The next day, on February 21st, 2023, the fight happened. There is footage of this fight and it's very intense. Sada is the one wearing the skirt and she just went absolutely crazy on Norma. At one point, she grabbed a stone and she started hitting Norma on the head with the stone. What's crazy is that there was a group of students just standing there watching this and cheering on the fight. At one point, Norma starts bleeding and the classmates actually laugh at her. Okay, more in part 2.
23-year-old Ayoko Tamura has been missing for 48 hours. Meanwhile, her brother is frantically looking for clues about her whereabouts, so he hacks into her Twitter account and begins scrolling through her DMs, and that's when he comes across a username that he doesn't recognize. He clicks on their page and sees an anime profile picture with a rope around its neck. The bio reads, "I want to help those who are really struggling. Feel free to DM me." It's spring of 2007 in Kanagawa, Japan, and a young girl walks into her little brother's room and looks up to see him and a friend from school dangling from the ceiling. As it turns out, this is actually pretty common for the boys who play what they call the choking game, where they take turns choking each other or themselves and see who can last longer before they pass out. The younger brother, Takahiro, is a seemingly normal kid. He gets pretty good grades in school, plays baseball, and has these really thick black glasses. And after he graduates high school in 2009, he starts working as a game operator at a local arcade. Eventually, he quits this job and moves out of his parents' house to Tokyo's red light district, where he becomes a full-time sex scout. Essentially, he's the guy that recruits women into the sex work business, but he's not exactly a good fit because he can't even talk to a girl. He solves this by using social media to lure women to him, but eventually Takahiro gets a bad rep around the community for being a creep. The workers and other scouts start telling the women to watch out for that guy and begin posting his pictures online. Eventually, he's arrested for getting a woman involved in sex work, but receives a suspended jail sentence, so he's released shortly after. And when he gets out, he moves to a town called Zama, where he lives in a one-bedroom apartment that later becomes his house of horrors. He then sets up 2 accounts, where he starts hunting vulnerable women through various hashtags on Twitter. He uses hashtag I want to die and hashtag suicide recruitment to privately DM those who interact with his posts. On August 22nd, 2017, one of the women who DMs him, Maizuki Mayura, agrees to meet Takahiro at a local bar before going to an arcade. However, he's quite disappointed when she brings her boyfriend Shogo along, but he convinces the young girl to come back to his apartment alone, where she's never seen again. A few days pass by and Shogo goes to Takahiro's apartment looking for his girlfriend, but he too disappears. Over the next 2 months, several local women mysteriously disappear, and the most recent of which is 23-year-old Ayoko Tamura. Her brother is reading through her DMs when he comes across a profile at Hanging Pro, and the account has an avatar with a noose around its neck and crimson-colored wrists. He then comes across a tweet that reads, "If you are at a dead end, please consult me." Ayoko's brother then files a missing persons report with the police, and investigators come across another Twitter account that belongs to the same user. On this profile, he's a lonely guy who just wants to die, but not alone. In the meantime, the brother is doing some investigative work himself, and he sees various women are engaging with both of these accounts, so he begins messaging them to see if he can find any information about the whereabouts of his sister. Eventually, one of these women messages him back, so they agree to make a fake date to catch the hanging pro. Halloween night 2017. The woman is on her way to meet Takahiro at a nearby train station, and when she arrives, he's already sitting there waiting for her. They begin to make their way back to his apartment. He unlocks the door, they walk inside, and it's at that moment that they hear a knock at the door. Police then come barging through the door and grab Takahiro, demanding to know where Ayoko is, and he calmly looks at them and says, "She's in there." The officers turn and look and see a small cooler on the floor, and when they open it up, they find her head. They proceed to search the rest of the apartment, where they find the body parts of 8 other victims scattered in various boxes and coolers. Takahiro tells the officers that he kept everything that didn't decompose because he's afraid of getting caught, and he'd even tried to cover up the smell with kitty litter, but obviously this didn't work. When his neighbors are questioned, they too say that his place always smelled, but they had assumed it was the sewage. They also go on to say that Takahiro was always taking out his trash, and now they know the reason why. Autopsy reports show he's claimed the lives of 9 victims, 8 women and 1 man, all in the span of just 2 months. The report also shows that the cause of death for the victims was quite similar. All their bodies were dismembered, and they had red marks on their neck, hinting that Takahiro had choked them to death, something he had done since he was a kid. Takahiro Shiraishi is arrested and accused of 9 counts of murder. His ex-girlfriend later tells reporters that she had received a text from him saying, "I killed a hostess who wanted to die, but she took it as a joke." The defense team actually runs with this logic, saying that since his victims had consented to be murdered, his charges should be significantly reduced. Takahiro, however, disagrees and says that when it came to it, none of these women truly wanted to die, so he pleads guilty to all 9 counts, showing absolutely no remorse and admitting that he was only sorry that he got caught. He's then sentenced to death, which ironically is carried out by hanging in Japan. Takahiro is currently waiting on death row, where inmates wait days, sometimes years, before they're executed, and they're not told until the day it happens.
Imagine being buried under a kitchen floor. This is the horrific true crime of Andrew Innes, requested by a follower. Back in 2020, Lynn Burke, the 25-year-old Filipino mother, was sat at home, like many of us, during the lockdown in the UK. Her home was far from where she was raised. It was in Bristol in England. After heading to the UK a couple of years earlier from the Philippines back in 2019, Lynn Burke was expecting a happy and new adventure with her husband Lexington. They met in her homeland, fell in love, gotten married before making the big decision to leave her homeland and return to the UK with Lexington, a decision that would later leave her viciously mutilated. Her and her husband would have a beautiful little girl together, which they would name Jellica. Unfortunately, family life wasn't meant to be for the 3 of them, as it's claimed that Lexington became more aggressive since returning back to the UK, a different character to the one Lynn had met. The couple would decide to end their relationship mutually. Lynn was now stuck in a foreign land to her, in Bristol, during a pandemic. The only little light she had was the little Jellica. She decided to try and meet someone new and joined a dating site called Filipinian Cupid. Initially looking to perhaps find another Filipinian to date, but instead she found a much older Scottish man named Andrew Innes. Andrew had smarts for sure. He had been at Aberdeen University. He was a computer gaming engineer. At 52 years old, however, he was over double Lynn's age and had some baggage too. Allegedly had previously been married to a Japanese woman over in Japan, where he had children with her too, before breaking up and then being deported back to the UK. A similar story to Lynn's in a sense. At first, Lynn was a bit put off by this, but over time she started to think on it. Probably with the loneliness in her life as well, she decided to give love another chance. Big mistake. They'd strike up a relationship online at first, and apparently Andrew had even offered a £1,000 a month job to Lynn. She didn't want to leave Bristol where she had settled, but Andrew wanted her and Jellica in Dundee, Scotland with him. A whopping 440 miles separated the pair. 18th of February 2021, the couple would decide to meet and Benny Lynn would get a chance to see the sights of Dundee. Little 2-year-old Jellica would come along too. A couple of weeks later, there had been no sign of Benny Lynn Burke and her daughter Jellica. Benny Lynn's sister had tried to contact her and at first was greeted with text message replies, but then started to get responses from Andrew instead. It said that she demanded a video with Benny Lynn and instead all she received was an old one. Andrew Innes had palmed this off. He claimed that she had gone off with another man near Glasgow and he hadn't seen her since. Lexington, Benny Lynn's ex, had also tried to contact her for his custody visit of Jellica with 2 text messages and a missed call. There's talks that Andrew had claimed that Lexington was trying to take Jellica from Benny Lynn, so Benny Lynn had shut off her phone and fled, so this couldn't happen. It was all sounding very suspicious, and Shella, the sister, was extremely and rightfully worried. The police were soon in action. They had a missing 25-year-old and 2-year-old. At first they tried to gain access to Andrew's residence, but he refused. March the 5th, 2 weeks after Benny Lynn and Jellica had gone with Andrew, they managed to track Andrew Innes' vehicle doing that long distance to and from Bristol. That same vehicle was sat on his Troon Avenue driveway. With this evidence now pointing directly at Andrew, they decided to proceed and question him. Notably, there was a 7-year-old young girl sat on the sofa in the living room watching cartoons. Andrew Innes stated that this was his daughter. Under intense interrogation, Andrew Innes told detectives that same story, that Benny Lynn had gone off to be with another man. Mounting pressure onto Innes, the police would keep poking holes into the 52-year-old's story. During this time, he had claimed that they had broken off the relationship when he had looked at her phone and seen that she was seeing other men, before he would admit to killing Benny Lynn Burke and say, "She's under the kitchen floor." The police would unfortunately find out that the 7-year-old girl in his house was in fact not his daughter, but in fact would be another victim of this depraved murderer. With her testimony, this is what happened.